Welcome to today's Google Hangout, sponsored by Fire Engineering. We thank Bobby Halton and everybody from Clarion. Today we're here with PJ Norwood. PJ, can you introduce some of our guests?
Absolutely, Frank. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today we have a really good lineup, a really diverse group of officers from around the country. We have Mike Dobesh, who's Assistant Chief in Richfield, Minnesota. A friend of ours who's been on the show before, be a familiar face, Dave Polikoff, who's a Battalion Chief in Montgomery County. And we have Brian Zaitz, who's a captain in West Metro, Minnesota. All these fire officers come to us with a really diverse background and diverse departments, especially when we start talking about multi-company training. You know, Frank Ricci works for an urban department with a training school, and you can discuss bringing companies down there, multiple companies. And then myself, I work for a combination department. So I'm the training officer of one. I'm the training division of one for a combination department. I have 44 career staff positions, and I have 100 volunteers in the books. I have about 32 interior firefighters per year. So managing the training for both the career staff and also the volunteer staff, one, to make sure they're competent, right, Frank? But also two, to make sure that they meet the standards. That's a challenge within our combination departments, our volunteer departments, as well as our career-only departments.
Without a doubt. And I think that a lot of it is the training divisions, a lot of times, especially in smaller places, they get tasked with everything. If it just doesn't fit into a box, the training division will take care of it. And it actually takes them away from contact hours. And I don't care where you work, your training division has to be about contact hours and building your company officers and encouraging your battalion chiefs, deputy chiefs to host multi-company drills within the battalion, because the best way for the chief's crews to operate is to know exactly what that chief's expectations are. So let's start off with Dave Polikoff and kind of give us a little bit background on how you like to conduct a multi-company drill, because I know you do that at the battalion chief level.
We have a battalion training where we actually have our entire battalion will come together, and all 7 companies within the battalion will train. We put out formal monthly trainings that come down from our training academy, and they all various topics from bread and butter skills to hazmat, metro, things like that. We also do multi-jurisdictional training where we run a lot of mutual aid with the companies that surround us in the DC metro area. And once a month, we meet with the battalion chiefs from those departments, and we discuss topics, any training that's coming up in either county. We'll send units there. They'll send units to us. And we want to make sure that we're all operating on the same sheet of music when we're running fires, especially when we're running mutual aid calls. We're all doing the same job. We're working on the same radio frequencies. So we need to make sure that we're utilizing the policies for the jurisdictions that we're running in. So a lot of it comes down to bread and butter skills, things like that, the metro that we share with DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And within our company or within our county, we do a lot of battalion training that comes down to rural water supply, bread and butter operations like pulling attack lines, truck company operations, ladders, roof ops, things like that. And as well as whatever's coming up, we just finished up our EMEDS program for the entire county. And that's the way that we actually capture patient information when we run EMS calls. And that's pushed out through MIMS, which is through the state of Maryland. So a lot of that's managed on the battalion chief level, and it's everything's happening every month. We have something going on.
Chief, so give everybody a perspective. What type of numbers are you talking? So when you do, how many companies, how many members per company, and when you start talking these inter-jurisdictional training, what type of numbers or firefighters are you talking about running through these programs?
When we're doing inter-battalion training, we have 5 battalions in our county. Each battalion has about 150, actually, I'll take that back, has about 60, 70 personnel per battalion. So you're looking at running a company drills for about 70 people, or 70 battalion drills, or I'm sorry, a battalion drill for about 70 firefighter and officers. And we also, because we're a combination department, we offer the same training in the evenings and weekends, so the volunteers also get the same training. So we're all working, again, off the same sheet of music when we're running these calls.
Is the volunteer training separate from the career staff training, or do you allow them to, when they're available? So if you have a volunteer that works an evening shift or nights, do you allow them to attend the training with the career staff?
No, absolutely. If they're at the station and they're riding the apparatus, and they're if our battalion training is happening on a time that they're there, if they want to be on the apparatus and train, absolutely. We don't turn anybody away from training. We're all we work in the same county, whether it's career or volunteer. We're running the same calls. We're working hand in hand, side by side. So we're all training together. And if they're there during the day and we're training, they train with us. If they do work those 9 to 5 jobs, we have evening trainings and weekend trainings, things like that. It also sets up the same way for at our training academy, where our recruits, our career recruits, will go through the training academy recruit school, and we also have the same classes on nights and weekends for the volunteers, so they can also get the same training.
Excellent. Sounds like you got a good system. What I like that you mentioned is when you're doing this training, you also incorporate like the communications piece. You know, if we could incorporate that communications piece into every piece of training, regardless of what we're doing, that really rolls over to the fire ground to make a safer environment and a smoother environment in the fire ground. So
absolutely, we share the same radio frequencies. We use the same radios, portable radios, as the rest of our mutual aid companies. So we have their channels and frequencies, talk groups in our radios, and vice versa. We all follow the NIMS standard, so we're all using the same terminology when we're running calls together and things like that. The only thing that's really different is slight variation of the policies and procedures and our numbering system for our apparatus.
Excellent. I just want to remind anybody that's listening live today, use the hashtag FETalk on Twitter and send your questions, comments, concerns, and we'll discuss it amongst the group. We'll just discuss live here with the group and kind of hopefully get your questions answered. If it's something you tweet out that we don't get to, we'll follow up through Twitter, through an email, or direct message after the show's over. So please send your comments our way. Chief Dobesh, from Richfield, Minnesota. What do you have to add to that? How do you kind of do your training, your multi-jurisdictional training there in Minnesota?
So a lot of what we do is very similar. I think the challenge that we have is we don't really set ourselves up as battalions because, typically we're mixing not only career departments, but volunteer departments and paid on call departments. So there's no standard as far as like who's on what battalion. It's basically who's at work that day. So we take it and really, our training will be a lot of the same stuff, a lot of the same basic drills. We had 1 week where we took and we actually did live fire training for about 275 firefighters from 14 different departments and tried to make that work. So, I mean, it's really just a matter of scheduling. It's a matter of putting everything together, creating a plan to make sure that it works, and then, rolling it out across the region. So it's, for us, we do a lot of the same stuff. I mean, I think firefighters across the nation are looking for the same skills. So it's really about just making sure that they have the opportunity to practice those skills in an environment that's safe, well-maintained, and ready to work for them.
You have to have some significant logistical challenges when you start looking at, over, what'd you say, 200 live fire?
So we did, yeah. So we actually had 3 structures that we were burning in over the course of 3 days. And we did the same thing. We did the morning session and then an evening session so that those volunteers could participate as well. So logistically, it was quite a feat, and the burn teams were able to pull it off, and I think that's really a credit to the people that you have in the planning process. So as long as you have a good plan, you can make the training work. Absolutely.
There's a lot of pieces to that big of a live fire evolution for that many firefighters, logistically for your cadre and rehab. So I'm sure you spent a lot of time in the planning phase on those.
Yes, we did. Yeah, but now the plan is already written, so it's, if we decided we're ever going to do it again, we just dust off the plan and make sure that the pieces and parts are in place. So
excellent. And learn from what you can do better on, right?
Absolutely.
So Brian, in your spot as a captain in Metro West in Minnesota, talk to me about your role in training and what types of challenges do you have that may differ from what we just heard about, and anything exciting going on as far as training in your agency?
So it's Missouri, Metro West Missouri.
It's all, Minnesota. It's all the same, isn't it?
It's all the same, right? Midwest, it's all the same thing. So, I think the thing that related is maximizing the guys' times, the firefighters' times. And so, you know, I'm a big believer in the company level trainings that are the building blocks for that. So, you know, when we do our company trainings, we have 5 stations and we come together as a department. We try to do scenario-based trainings to maximize those skill sets that are learned and honed at that company level. There's not, you know, not that it's a bad thing, but you bring 4 companies together, 3 companies together, whatever it is, to do company levels. You know, it's a huge hit on the department because now you're filling in and having to do that stuff. You know, it's just a matter of maximizing that time. So for us, when we do multi-company trainings, we'll go to the tower. Another thing we do is we'll do North County has a training association, and they'll cover each other to do trainings as well.
One thing that's important that I see with company training and multi-drill training is that a lot of times departments do it as a training for the firefighters and the company officers, and the chiefs kind of stay back. And if you have the opportunity to do multiple companies at the same time, it's important that there's 2 things I really like to stress. One, do one evolution, do it right, and have all of the players participate in the evolution. So I'm going to give you an example. Those who follow me on Twitter see that I have a tower crane in New Haven. So the high steel's going up, and we're doing 4 drills, the same drill for each division, to remove an operator who has a medical emergency 172 feet from the top. But we're not just training the special operations companies. We set up a full command structure. So the deputy chief on each division, the battalion chiefs, everybody gets their role, and we mitigate the incident as one incident, one scenario. We then do a hot wash, critique it afterwards. It only lasts an hour and a half. We get the guy down or girl down in about 30 to 40 minutes now, and that's with everybody climbing up to the top of it as well. And then everybody gets to buy into it, and everybody gets to practice their skills. The worst thing you can do is have a multi-company drill where the chiefs aren't participating. They're not playing their role. They're just watching. And essentially, as Anthony Abillo says, that you got the opinion brigade. They're critiquing everybody, but yet they don't want to get a glove and get in the game. And we all need practice, and we all get better the more we do it. And if you're doing one evolution, doing it for all 4 shifts, so you don't have 4 different departments, is real key. And some places it's hard to do a drill for 6 hours because of covering everything. But it's not hard to do a multi-company drill where you do one evolution and you're there for an hour, 2 hours. And believe it or not, you'll get everybody to buy into that concept. Dave Polikoff, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, like I was telling PJ, we just we just wrapped up our EMEDS training. That was mostly in the station. Each battalion come to a specific station. They sit in it was a classroom setting, but we actually were just now wrapping up our command competencies for our incident commanders, or all of our certified chief officers, career and volunteer. We train the same way. It's kind of like the presentation I'm putting together at FDIC, where we bring every single command officer through, and they have to run scenarios in order to stay certified as a certified chief officer in our county. But yeah, when we have our drills, be it multi-jurisdictional or within the battalion chief is usually the one that's presenting the drill. It's handed down from the training center. We go over everything in a quick training class and make sure we got all the information, all the paperwork, and then we're delivering the drill, the classroom portion. And then when we roll out to do the practical stuff, we're usually running the command for that particular drill. So we're always involved, and I'm a big proponent is if you're going to be teaching, you're also going to have to be participating, because you're going to be out on on those calls as well, utilizing your command skills. So you have to be every bit as sharp as the guy that's pulling the attack line going into the front door, or the dude up on the roof cutting hole, as you on the radio commanding those people.
Brian, where are you at with doing long drills versus shorter drills?
So for me, I want to hit the objectives, whatever objectives we set. So I, like you guys, a 1 hour evolution drill and move those companies in, move them back out. you know, sometimes if you got to do the long evolutions like the tower crane event, that might be best. But you know, if you can get guys in, the company's in, hour, knock it out, get the essential objectives knocked down, and move on, and you get the crews rotated through. I think you're much better off.
Yeah. See, in my agency, Frank, everything we do is kind of short and focused. I try to stay that hour and a half, because my company's on duty. I don't have the luxury, you know, I can't take an engine company out of service like you can in the city for a couple hours. So when I'm doing training and evolutions, the only time during the year that those companies are out of service is during live fire training. We actually take them off shift. So we take them when they're on their night shifts, because we do the 3 on 3 offs. When they come off of their night shift on their middle shift, then we take the whole shift out of town, because we have a burn facility, to the burn facility. So that's the only time they're together off duty. Everything else is done on duty. So it's quick hit, 45-minute, hour and a half evolutions. And really this time of year, especially the summer, really keeping in mind that whatever I do at the end of that training, they may have to go to work and they may have a fire. So you're really trying to keep it light, but making sure that the tasks are accomplished, make sure we hit the objectives, but also keeping in mind that, you know, these companies are in service. You know, halfway through the training, at the end of the training, they may have to go to work for a prolonged incident. So that's a challenge for myself.
Chief Dobesh.
Yeah.
Weigh in on that, on the length of training, and particularly how do you keep continuity of instruction between the different shifts?
So one of the things that we really focus on, especially in the planning phase, is making sure that all the instructors that are going to be running the drills are going to be running it the same way. So for the week leading up to those multi-company drills, all the instructors are coming together, walking through the scenarios, walking through the different sets and reps of things that we're going to do. And then we actually, you know, regardless of who's going to be doing the instruction, it will be the same from day to day. So we put a lot of work on the front end to make sure that the plan is going to be consistent across all trainings. And then making sure that our incident commanders are also going to be part of it. I just saw on Twitter somebody asking about dispatch, and our last company, or our last multi-agency drill that we did, we actually did kind of a Mayday course, and we did that with dispatch, right? And the reason we train with dispatch is how many times are they going to hit the Mayday tones in the course of their career? And quite frankly, we don't want them to screw that up. So we wanted to make sure that dispatch was connected to that training. And when we called for the Mayday, that they were able to activate the tones and make sure that we're running the entire process from dispatch through to RIT deployment to the firefighter being rescued, and all the way to wrapping up the Mayday and going back to normal traffic. Those are really essential components, and you need to put that all in the planning. You need to put that into making sure that everybody's going to be playing off that same sheet of music. Not every one of us can probably teach at every one of those drills, right? Because it wears and tears on us as human beings, but making sure that if I'm not the one there, that the drill is going to be done the same way the next day is absolutely essential.
As far as the dispatch issue, Sonny O'Connor asked, and Chief, I'm glad you hit on it. And it's a pet peeve of Frank and mine. I think it was in 2013, 2012, 13, we authored a DVD through Penwell and Fire Engineering on Mayday for the fire dispatcher. Because what we found in our travels is there's a lot of dispatchers, a lot of telecommunicators across the country who they're like the stepchildren of the fire service.
Some of them didn't even know what a low air alarm sounded like. So unless you show them, they ain't going to know that.
Yes, we wanted to make sure that we put something together to educate the dispatchers on what are the Mayday parameters. When there's a firefighter calling a Mayday, what can they be going through? What can possibly be the situation? And what's that vibro alert sound like? What does that pass device sound like? And what is their role, right? And depending on their agency or their jurisdiction, their role may be simply just to sit back and listen and take good notes, maybe start diagramming that incident. But if that incident commander, which so often happens when a Mayday is transmitted, misses that Mayday, they have to understand if you're using Lunar, what that Lunar information is and how to relay that to the incident commanders. They really have to know their role if the incident commander hears the Mayday or if the incident commander does not hear the Mayday. So that's a really good point that Sonny brought up. And Chief, I'm really excited to hear that you involve the dispatchers in training, because we are always the first one to blame the dispatchers when something goes wrong.
Absolutely.
They're just the easy target, you know. However, the majority of the time when you really look at
Well, there's
the
a
issue,
reason they lock those people in a room too. Just so, I mean, you don't lock firefighters or cops in a room, but the dispatchers, they're locked in a room. There's a reason
to keep us away from them. But a lot of times you'll find that the issue could have been avoided if we, as the fire service and the responders, took the time to educate them on why we want certain things done, why we need certain things a certain way, because a lot of times just lack of education. And it doesn't hurt to stop by your communication center with a box of coffee and a dozen of donuts and just say hello. And I know that some of those dispatch centers are very difficult. There's a lot of red tape to go through to actually train with your dispatchers. However, doesn't mean you can't stop by for a couple cups of coffee just to say hello and build some relationships, because those go a long way.
And as we're on communications, Brian wants to get in here. So, but let me just go to Dave Polikoff first, because I think that a lot of times the officers don't practice talking on the radio enough. In Dave's class at FDIC, he gives everybody a portable, which they're kind of shocked at first when they see it, like, oh no, I'm on the spot. But I think it's essential for learning. Dave, can you elaborate on that a little bit, and then we'll go to Brian?
Yeah, the giving somebody, when you want them to perform a specific way, you're going to have to give them the tools in order to get the desirable outcomes. Like with any training session you do, if you want them to do forcible entry, you got to get them the tools. When we are talking about lieutenants and captains and battalion chiefs, assistants, deputies that are on the radio that are going to be commanding fires, I want them to have that radio in their hand. And I also have a radio in the front of the room, so they're not only using the radio, they're hearing themselves as they're giving initial on-scene reports, as they're making groups and divisions and commanding unit or running the incident command. And then I also have the rest of my team out in another room with radios, role-playing engine companies and trucks and other battalion chiefs that are talking on the radio. And so it's the closest thing I can do in real life, aside from lighting the actual facility on fire. I think that FDIC would frown upon that, but getting them the tools in their hand to be able to practice what it's going to be like when they're in the car kind of takes the stress out of it. It also takes the stress out of knowing what an on-scene report is supposed to sound like according to our policies, and being able to get those reps in. And the more reps you get, the more comfortable you get. It's almost second nature.
And for those that are watching today, this is a complete side conversation who didn't get their proposal accepted at FDIC. This is what you have to look at as some of your competition. This is an instructor who's not just coming to the classroom with a bunch of slides and reading the information. It's a classroom program, but yet he's getting involvement. There's interaction. It's high-paced. It's high fidelity. So when you're redoing your submission for next year, take some of the things that Polikoff was just talking about and think about incorporating some of those things into your proposal for next year. Because with over 900 submissions and only just over 200 classrooms, that's what you need to do to kind of stand out and to be different. So congratulations again on getting FDIC in 2019. Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, we were talking about the dispatch centers. We actually took the opportunity at our dispatch center and did the dollhouse burns with them, which was kind of interesting. They had no idea some of the things that we talk about on the fire rate, on the radios, the terminology. And it really was a eye-opener in terms of dispatch center and their cognizant knowledge of kind of what's going on in today's fire ground. So that was a great opportunity for us. And, kind of, again, just kind of built those relationships up with our dispatch center. So it was good stuff.
So Frank, what he was just saying, I know you'll love to hear this. And Brian, they use the dollhouse with their dispatch center so they can show them fire behavior and terminology and stuff. I know you're a big advocate of the dollhouse.
I love the dollhouse. I don't know, what do you call it? It's not teaching tactics, it's teaching fire behavior. And I have you come down to our recruit classes. I just like making fun of you.
I know. So I give you that chance again.
But I'm for showing the recruits and even on-duty companies. That's a great quality drill. And it also allows us to light something on fire, which is a good thing.
It's a great way to use it. I've never thought of with dispatch center. So Brian, that's awesome that you guys are doing that. I really think it takes that classroom again, like Dave Polikoff was just saying, takes that classroom with just PowerPoint slides and making it interactive and giving them something really to engage them where you're actually teaching and learning something. So I think using DOS for dispatches is a phenomenal idea.
Chief Dobesh, how are you documenting your drills? Is each company officer that comes to a multi-company drill, do they do an individual training report? Does the training division just do one report? or does the chief's office just do one report?
So with multiple different departments, we actually have to have each department kind of managing that. All of the departments that are currently participating do have a online solution so that we can put a class into the online solution, but typically the responsibility for tracking the training is done at the individual department. So if there's 12 different departments, everybody's signing their own training attendance sheet, and then those are getting entered at their local agency.
How about safety? Brian, let's go back to you for a few minutes. Do you assign a safety officer for all of your hands-on training? And how do you manage that piece?
So our training officer is our safety officer typically. If not, we can designate someone. One of the things we also do is we have a drill safety plan. So we call it a DSP, a drill safety plan that gets filled out for any high hazard training. So anything that's going to involve live fire, bailout, even forcible entry for that matter, anything that's kind of outside the norm, we'll fill that out. And prior to us implementing the training, that drill safety plan will identify as many hazards and risks that we can mitigate prior to try to ensure the safety of the companies working through that. So, and to the chief's point earlier, once you do it, then you have it for the next time, and you identify, hey, let's make this better. This didn't work. So, and those just stay on file kind of, but those are really the key components for our safety plan.
Chief Polikoff, how about rehab? That's a piece that I know as a training officer, it's something that I should always consider a little bit earlier than I usually do, right? But it's one of those things that, oh, it's a hot day. We're doing, we're stretching hose lines today, making sure we incorporate that rehab piece and making sure that we're taking care of the membership. How do you address that on the large scale when you're talking these, this training of over 200 firefighters to run them through? How do you identify that and how do you work that within your plan?
When we always have a 1403 that we utilize, whether we're doing live fire or not. It's just one of the components that we won't put into that 1403. But when we do any type of training, one of the rotations will be rehab, where the guys are actually coming out of their gear. They got water, shade spot. When we're doing live fire, it's the same thing. They'll rotate through 3 or 4 different positions. One of those positions will be rehab, where they're actually getting some downtime, getting fluids. We build rehabs into all of the drills, all the outside drills that we do, whether it be live firefighting or just practicing pulling hose lines, ventilation, forcible entry, whatever. One of the stations that they'll rotate through will be rehab. So that's where we have medical there if it's needed. Water, shade. If it's a really hot day, we may have some misting fans, things like that, or we may even have our one of our buses that is running air conditioning. Guys can go inside and sit inside of the a cool bus.
Question for everybody. We can go right around the horn here, starting with Brian. How do you determine whether you can train in the hot weather or not? Is it based off a heat index? Does it trigger does the heat index trigger some different rehab? How does your department work? Because I think everybody's a little bit different.
So we have a contract in place with the union that states 90 degrees heat index or above, no training in full turnout gear. And then 32 degrees or below, no training in turnout gear as well. So that's kind of our parameters. But
they have no turnout gear when it's below 32 degrees. That's convoluted.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy thing. But most guys, if you give them the opportunity and we work through it, talk to shop stewards, we can work through some of those things. The biggest thing being the heat. The cold temperature is obviously not the big issue. It's just having the trucks outside for too long with the cold. But for the heat, yeah, it's 90 degrees or above. With heat index, we won't do turnout gear. But we can still do stuff, we might do ropes and knots or something like that. It's just that full turnout gear.
Mike, how about you guys in Minnesota?
So in the summer, we typically will try and stay away from kind of doing those heavier lifting kind of things. So we typically try and build our training plan. Like our joint ops training happened in early May this year. Our next training will happen in October. So we're shooting more for those mean temperatures where we don't have to deal with high heat typically. In the event that we do get something, I think we've had one occasion in the last 10 years where we have had to adjust the training plan based on the forecast. And that was really just one of those, the training was scheduled over the course of 3 days. And at day number 2, we ended up with a heat index of over 95. And it was, you know what, we're just not going to do it today. If the members want to try and train on one of these other days, there's still opportunities later in the week, and we'll just skip the hot day and make sure that we try and get it done, hopefully with those guys at another point.
DJ?
So in our bargaining agreement, we have a heat index identified that we add 10 degrees if they're wearing turnout gear, and they cannot wear turnout gear in a heat index of 105 or greater, which is way above where I'm going to put members out in training and turnout gear to begin with. Could I? Absolutely, if I want to stay within the confines of the contract. However, I think when they put that clause in the contract, the intentions were right. On let's protect our members and make sure we don't have a rogue training officer that's going to be, drilling our guys for hours in heat index. But they clearly picked a number that was a little bit too high. So hopefully that will be identified. If you start looking at, this summer, we've had a really hot, humid summer here. We haven't hit 105 heat index yet.
Yeah, in New Haven, it's 80 degrees in the heat index, and the whole world stops. And the way it's worded is any strenuous activity. So they can go out in the Marine unit in the air conditioning. I'm good with that. But what do you call it? Because they may get a fire right after.
Correct.
So I was real curious to see what other departments do. There's
definitely some common sense that needs to be put in that. But however, we all know common sense is very different amongst a big group of people, especially firefighters. But I think the key is that there's some departments that when they hit that heat index, training ceases. All right, we're at our 80-degree heat index, no training. No, let's modify, right? So you need to start looking at your heat index and modifying your training on removing protective clothing, decreasing the time in protective clothing.
Go look at a building.
Look at a building, do some indoor training. But I've seen some contracts and when we hit that heat index, boom, training ceases. So they can't even, sit inside, and watch a video. But we also have on the other side, we had we were challenged. That part of the contract was challenged this winter. I had companies say, well, it's too cold outside. The heat index is below, and I forget the number off the top of my head, below the cold index. And I said, well, I think we're going to be inside. And he said, well, we're in a vacant. So now my tail is up, right? So we're in a vacant. Well, there's no wind in the vacant, so we're above. We're just going to make the training a little bit shorter, dress warm. And they were just pushing the envelope and seeing what they can get away with. And that's where I think that if it says X temperatures reached, training shouldn't be ceased. It should be modified, whether it's shorter duration or longer duration, or depending on whether you're cold or hot, right? Altering it a little bit and making some adjustments doesn't mean we stop.
Dave Polikoff, what do you do in Montgomery County, Maryland?
We have our heat indexes in place, and that's our policy and procedure, which went through notice and opportunity with the union. It was all agreed upon. And our duty chief tracks that. Once our temperature gets to a certain temperature, it's sent over to our communication center, and it's stated over our radio system that all outside strenuous activity is canceled. So that means we go in and do whatever it is that we're doing for the day. And the same thing for the cold. And obviously in mid-Atlantic, like you guys have up there in the Northeast, it gets pretty hot and humid. And they're pretty good with following that, following the heat index. And when it does hit those parameters, it's an announcement's made, and all strenuous activities is canceled. Doesn't really transition over to the battalion chiefs because we're driving around in air-conditioned cars, so we're still going to make our rounds, but that outside strenuous activity is canceled. We also have lightning strike sniffers in our training academy. So lightning within 10 miles, it sets off a warning system, kind of like you'd see on a golf course, and they seek shelter for, I think it's 20 minutes or something like that.
That's kind of cool. Brian, do you have lightning sniffers at your training academy where everybody hides under the desk?
Not yet, but it's a heck of an idea. I'll have to look at that.
Oh, that's funny. Mike brought up a good point, and he said that they schedule the training with the weather in mind. And I think that's very important. And I never mind throwing a rock at my own department because I think everybody learns from it when we all kind of shine a light. But like my department would do EMT refresher in October and like September, like the two best months to do live fire training. And so it's like, that's inside training. Can't we do that when it's August, or can't we do that when it's February? And there's always that, that push and pull between EMS. But, in New England, I think Benjamin Franklin taught us that you're supposed to work with the weather. We'll start off with Brian and go from there.
Yeah, we kind of faced the same thing. So, we were finding that like March, April, and October were PHTLS, ACLS, and PALS. And we're like, wait a second. Yeah. And so that's been modified now, thankfully. I think the intent was good. Guys weren't on vacation, so you could capture a greater audience of people. But we've kind of modified that now to, September is still, it's next month. We got PHTLS. But October's wide open for us. November's wide open for us. And then January and February, we're looking at ACLS and our PALS retraining. So, it took some communications, but to your point, we're trying to do the right stuff and look at those things and pre-plan a little bit better. And I think that's the key to the company trainings, battalion trainings. We talk about planning. Hey, let's look at how this training is going to go out. But really, what's the best month, weather-wise, time-wise, vacation-wise, to get this done? If we're going to do driver's training in an air-conditioned truck, and we got to do that every year, there's nothing saying we can't do that in the middle of July or August.
Mike, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, what you guys are saying is spot on. I mean, I don't think I can add anything to what you're saying. I think there's a lot of value in just kind of looking at the calendar and making sure that we're doing the right things at the right times. I mean, so I guess I would just leave it at that. We're, do good work, take care of your people.
DJ?
No, and that's the benefit of being a training division of one. If I don't want to have my turnout gear when it's on in 100 degrees, I'm not going to be outside training in 100 degrees. So I'm not going to require that of the men and women in my department. You know what I mean? So I do all my live fire training in October, November, December, and January. I do all my EMS refreshers as far as my paramedics need continuing education, PALS, PAP, ACLS, all that stuff. I do that in the months leading up to Christmas. My membership gets paid for any required classes. So the deal that I've always made with them, we're going to do that in November. So the overtime months that they're not getting a lot of extra overtime helps them out leading into the Christmas month. Try to help them out that way a little bit. I'm paying the overtime either way, regardless of when I'm paying it out. So it's easier to pay it out in November when there's a lot less going on just before Christmas. So it kind of helps them out a little bit. This time of year, I do a lot of pump training. I have a lot of new members coming up, so I'm trying to get a lot of members signed off. So we're out there now. I was out there for 3 hours this morning. It's not too bad flowing water on a day like this. And now as we get closer to the fall, we'll sign those members off, and then we're going into our live burn training and also hazmat training. We do all our hazmat stuff in like October, November when it's cold out. And then we'll start to cycle over again in January we have an indoor search and rescue maze that we'll do search and rescue. We'll do Mayday. We'll do communications training all within our maze in January and February.
Terrific. One thing that came up with us, and I think everybody here happens to be a career firefighter, but our members, we had a very small to non-existent training budget in the past. So they would go out on their own time to take state classes, and they would pay for the class and, get coverage from work. It was a huge, burdensome problem on our members. And then yet when the fire department was doing a drill that they wanted to participate on, and they happened to be off or they were on vacation when their shift was coming up, the fire department wouldn't let them participate in the drill. And to us, that made no sense. So when we started doing all this special operations training and kind of moving to all hazards, if somebody was on vacation, the union kind of said, listen, if they're going to take an own state class and it's not a mandatory required training like EMT refresher, and they want to take their own time to come and participate, even though they're not getting paid, we're going to let them, because it's almost like we're biting off our nose to spite our face. I'll start with Brian. Is that permissible in your department? If you're doing something that a member wants to participate on and they're on vacation on their shift, are you allowing them to come? And how's the union? Are they okay with that?
Yeah, so our guys are allowed to come in off duty if there's special operations training. We have a dive team, for example, that trains once a month. So if they're on vacation or whatever, that period of time, and they want to come in off duty, they're not compensated for it. However, they're allowed to come in and participate in the training. If anything that is required, like you said, EMT refresher or ACLS PALS, any of those classes that are required, they are compensated overtime rate for that. So we got it pretty good in that regards. But just to speak of that, it's kind of funny that some guys will take stuff and they'll be all in. And there's other guys, I'm sure we all have them in our departments, that if the district's not paying for it, they're paying for their lunch, their dinner, their gas, their time away, their hotel room at a 5-star hotel, they're not taking the class. It's kind of interesting to see that dynamic across the fire service.
And Brian, anybody participating in one of those drills on their day off or on a vacation day, the department covers them for workers' comp, though, correct?
Yes, so they'll be covered. Their workers' comp's no worries. If something happens, they're covered for that. And a lot of times too, the district will cover lunch or something like that for the whole, everybody's participating. So it's pretty good stuff. I mean, they're taken pretty good care of if they want to come in for something like that.
Dave Polikoff, how's it in Montgomery County, Maryland?
I know, like our special ops, we work a 24/48 schedule when you get a Kelly every 3 weeks. If you are assigned to special ops, I don't think you're allowed to have certain Kelly days that fall on the training. So you're going to be, your shift will catch the training, and everybody that's on the team should be on the on the schedule. I think a problem that we may run into, and I haven't had anybody come to me and say, "Hey, I'm off that day, but would you mind if I came in and participated in a drill?" I don't know if we start to get into the Fair Labor Standards Act issue where these guys are working but not getting paid. I know that we have had training classes that were offering something that may not be put on by the fire department. Like if somebody was coming in to speak or whatever, and they came in on their off time, they're not going to be compensated on that, but they're more than welcome to come in and sit in on it. But when it comes to practical work and things like that, I'm not sure what the actual ruling is, but I know that that it gets kind of sticky when you are a career firefighter and you are coming into work and not getting paid. I think that the union may fall under the Fair Labor Standards Act. It might not. It's just like jumping on a fire engine when your shift's off because it sounds like it's a working fire. Not saying that it's never happened, not saying that I've never done that, but I think it's kind of looked upon. Now, if the apparatus isn't going to get outstaffed, then we will turn around and give them time and a half for the time that they put in on that fire engine. But EMT and all the required classes, research and things like that, these guys on their off time are getting that overtime payment.
As they should. Mike?
Yeah, so again, anything required, our guys are going to get overtime for. We do offer in our city a tuition reimbursement program. So if they want to take something for advancement, they can get, I think it's up to like $2,500 a year to take classes to advance their knowledge in particular areas, as long as they relate to the job within the fire department. And then I think really that's the only thing that I would add, is that we have a tuition reimbursement program. So, for those members that want to advance their career, maybe not something that it's a required class, but something they want to take, we can use that program through the city just to help them kind of gain the knowledge.
Hey, PJ, let me add a little bit of clarity to one of the things I was saying. If a class is not a class that they're taking that isn't a required class, like truck company operations or pumps, that's not a required class. They'll still be able to take that class on their off time. They have to use their own leave, and but they'll still be able to take the class, and they get credit for the class. Just to come in to participate in something that wasn't a formalized class that our training academy offers, they're most likely not going to allow them to come in and participate. But for classes like trucks and pumps and practical rescue or vehicle machinery and all that stuff, the classes that we offer at the training academy, the members have to take it on their off time or using their own leave. So there is that. They are allowed to do that, but they're not going to be compensated for that.
All right. And thanks for the clarifying that. And, in here in my department, we're very similar. The only thing different that we've done, a little bit different, is we have four pay grades for our career staff. So A, B, C, and D is the pay grades. And we've written a professional development policy that outlines what classes they should be taking at each pay grade. And that came out of course, because we had a grade D firefighter his first year in the firehouse. He wanted to go to an Officer 1 class. And we said no. And he says, well, why? So, well, you should be going to officer school now. So that made us realize, well, we should really write a professional development policy. So we outline what classes they should be taking at each pay grade. They could take any of those classes within any of the outlining departments or the Connecticut Fire Academy, as long as it's approved training. So if they fill out the application, they send it to the training division. I say, yep, this member should be taking this class. We can cover it if they're working. So if they're working, we pay for the tuition for the class, pay for any books or equipment that they may need for the class. If they're working shift that day, we'll cover them. But if they're on their off duty, we won't pay them overtime to go to the class. So there's a little bit of a balance there. So we have a lot of members who take classes all the time that they're not getting paid or compensated for. And then we have a lot of members where those classes will fall on shifts where they're actually working, and we'll cover them. We help them with the expenses, and we cover them so they don't have to worry about, missing overtime and all that other stuff, because that's always been one of our issues. We don't want to go to the State Fire Academy because I may miss overtime that day. So this helps us allow them to take this training and not hurt them per se, as some of them would say, I'm taking additional training. So it's always that balance, that give or take a balance, but also making sure the training is appropriate. Make sure that training that they want to take is appropriate for their time and grade on the job. Brian, so your head bobbing there. You agree with that?
No, I completely agree. I think it's great. I think at the end of the day, everybody's trying to get guys the proper training, and all, like you guys say, stay within the Fair Labor Standards Act, take care of our people, and offer them the most opportunities. I really like your idea of the pay and grade, because we're starting to get guys at our department that come in with 2 or 3 years on the job somewhere else, come in as a new person to us, and they're ready to it's ready to take on the world. I need fire officer 1, 2, 3, everything within a matter of 6 months. And it's kind of like, well, hold on a second. I got a guy that's got 10 years and still trying to get those classes, or ready to take every tech rescue class, for example. So, kind of correlating, hey, you're here in the organization, maybe throttle back and maybe learn the truck, before we step into the officer role.
Yeah. That's for all the extra stuff, but just like everybody else on the call today, if it's required training, mostly your EMS stuff, because unfortunately we don't require any fire training. We're not at that point yet. Outside of recruit school and then the continued education that they get on shift, EMS is the only place that we really require them. Between EMT refreshers, continuing education, and then all those other ALS mandated classes that they have to take, we don't require them to take any. So that's where the kind of difference is. Chief Dobesh.
Yes.
So we have about 10, 12 minutes left. We'll give you an opportunity to kind of give a wrap up, maybe talk about some things that you've learned in your planning phase that you thought were a good plan and maybe didn't end up to be so good, and kind of the things that you may have learned. And then we'll go to Dave Polikoff, and then we'll go back to Brian, and we'll wrap up with Chief Ricci.
So I think the thing that I would just offer, and I don't know how many people are at what stage in trying to do some of these kind of coordinated or regional kind of training things, but one of the things that we did very early on, and as a regional group, was we decided that the first training that we were going to roll out across virtually, I think at that time it was about 8 or 9 departments. We didn't want any department to stand up and feel like they were the expert, right? So what we did was we took a basic animal rescue training, right? So this was just after Hurricane Katrina demolished New Orleans, and everybody was worried about the animals. So there was no department that could stand up and say, hey, we're the experts in animal rescue training. So what we did as a training group was we took all the departments, put them all into a room over the course of 3 days, and all the firefighters learned basic animal rescue training. And it allowed us the opportunity to get people in the same room, talk to each other, get to know each other, build some of the relationships in a very safe place, because there wasn't the expert in the room. And regardless of whether they were career or volunteer, it gave them the opportunity to stand up and be counted and recognized as just being a professional. And I think that's what we all want. So over the course of time, we haven't had to go back to that, because we've actually had the opportunity to do a lot of different things in the last probably 9 years as a joint operations group. And, you know, we just continue to work off of those relationships that were built at that basic animal rescue training. One department with another working side by side, and then people see each other on scenes, and it just kind of perpetuates the machine. And that flywheel of success, if you will, just keeps turning and grinding away. And, you know, so today it's actually pretty easy. You put together a couple drills, make sure that there's going to be enough people there to watch it, make sure it's safe, make sure we give adequate rest. If we need to clean people off when we're done, we got the decon set up, and whatever it is, we just make sure that we're taking care of our people and trying to train them at a level that's higher than they were at the day when they walked in. So,
Chief, I think you're doing a great job, especially with the animal rescue thing, because I want to let all of our viewers know that animal crackers, when I was a kid, they were in cages, and now they've been freed. So I don't know if it started in Minnesota or at that drill, but they're free, and hopefully the fictional animals that were in fictional cages don't fictionally eat each other. Dave Polikoff.
Remember, this is the Hangout. This ain't the Politics and Tactics show.
He was talking about animals. I just had to bring up the crackers.
Politics and Tactics show is Monday.
Monday night with Dave Polikoff. But hey, they were in cages when I was a kid. I'm very confused. Go ahead, Dave.
One of the things that I've learned when you're bringing, you know, a battalion together of 60 people, or you're doing large scale drills where you're bringing in the entire county to roll them through, is logistics. And you know, everything that you do is to support the operation, but logistics wise, you got to have the right tools, you got to have the right instructors, you got to have food, you got to have water, all that stuff. If your logistics are a little weak, your whole training is going to suffer. So that's one of the things that we found, that we need to make sure that we're beefed up on the logistical end. So when we go into the training of whatever it is that we're going to do, the guys have the tools that they need to make the training successful, and they also have a place to go back. And, you know, everybody wants to have food, so we need to make sure that we can go back and we can get something to eat, and to hydrate ourselves so that we can continue to roll through the drill. So logistics is the biggest thing that I've found that training is key on, of having everything that you need to make sure that the drill is a success.
Brian?
Yeah, I would echo everything everybody said. I said the other thing I would say is make sure it's objective based, and you know that you're not just bringing everybody together because it's quarterly and we say we do that. Make sure that there's clear objectives that have been written out that are focused on either normal response, SOGs, something, NFPA standard, so that you have a backing. So when guys complain, or because you're inevitably going to have somebody that doesn't want to do it, hey man, this is exactly what we do on the real job. And make it as realistic as possible so that the people's time there, the firefighters' time, is capitalized and not just that's how you get buy-in, I think, is having an objective base. So that, and like I said, everything else, you know, making sure that everybody's coming to the table at the same time so that there's not some ego maniac in the room. And then the logistics is always going to be a headache.
So I just want to add, and I'll turn it over to Frank to kind of close out the show. And I know this is something that Frank always talks about in his training. If you're an officer, if you wear a white helmet, you should be training too. You shouldn't be just showing up at the training, you know, the Mayday training, and watching, right? If you're going to take a command role during an actual Mayday incident, great. Take that command role and practice. However, if some point you're going to put an SCBA in your back and potentially enter a building, you should be participating the other end of the Mayday training as well. Show your members that you can still do the job. Sling the air pack, crawl around, stretch a line, do some search and rescue. But if you're job and you're willing to do the same job that they're going to do for you.
I think you're 100% correct. And if you want to instill confidence as a chief, and I think you have it right, you got to have that balance. But if you're going to participate in the command portion, there's nothing. I had no problem embarrassing myself. I have no issue with that whatsoever. So, and put your company at ease and say, hey, times. Now I moved, and I pretty much like to coordinate drills, as Brian said, that are realistic. Anything that the members may actually face at 3 o'clock in the morning with not a lot of supervision, I want to be able to do it with a lot of supervision, realistic, where we can critique it. And I think that's huge. I see departments like take confined space that's required. They're doing the same simulator year after year, and you're doing your members a disservice. You may have a great simulator, but how much better off would they be if you used that simulator at your training academy one time for the initial cert, and then did a different confined space in your districts for multi-company drills? And what we're finding in New Haven is, by reaching out to the marinas, by reaching out to the construction companies, by reaching out to do vacants, we're seeing build relationships with those community partners. And every time we've done a multi-company drill, we've actually had the company offer to buy us equipment that we then put through the Board of Aldermen. So we did confined space at Buchanan Marina. They bought us an Arizona Vortex. We're doing tower crane drill. Now they see that we're invested in saving their people. They're going to buy us a rope winch to get equipment up there that we got to bring through the Board of Aldermen now. So doing realistic training does a couple of things. One, helps all your personnel, helps your command staff perform, but it builds those essential community relationships and prepares you. We got a couple minutes. Let's go to Mike on realistic training. Send it around one more time.
Well, I would just say that realistic training is really the only way you're going to get the buy-in from the troops, right? I mean, if you make it unrealistic, nobody really cares and nobody's invested in it. So the only way to make anything worthwhile is to make realistic training. The fact that if you want to do it, company drills, company level drills, that's easy to do. Go out, pull a line, run up the stairs, whatever it is. But when you're coordinating multiple agencies, you really need to spend the time on the front end, the planning, the logistics, making sure all those pieces are coming together so that when it's rocking and rolling, people get it and they're doing good work, because everybody wants to be the best that they can be when they're doing this job.
Dave Polikoff?
Yeah, I agree that the only type of training that you should really be focusing on is that realistic training. That's how you're going to get that buy-in from your folks, to make sure that again, the logistics is there. There's nothing more satisfying than when the training is over, that everybody comes to the instructor saying that was some of the best training that I ever had. It's a good feeling that you put on a good product, and the guys are walking away with something that they are going to continue to work towards. So that whole realistic aspect, even if you're not doing Class A burns, but you have smoke machines or whatever, or something to obscure visibility, that is going to pay dividends in the long run, is that realistic training.
Dave, I like to do is I don't like to use smoke machines, because I feel that impacts the ability for the instructors to safely watch and manage the evolution. I like to use saran wrap, the peel and stick saran wrap. You put that on the outside of the mask. It doesn't alter the mask at all. It still gives them that allow some ambient light through, and it makes them feel like they're still in smoke. And because since I'm in the training division of 1, I don't have a lot of instructors. So for me to be able to look across a room and have my eyes on multiple members doing different evolutions, I kind of need that safety piece added in. I do like the smoke machines when I have enough instructors. That's pretty rare. Yeah,
we use the press and seal with Capital Fire when we run a class through, so we can watch the guys doing their stuff. So we use the press and seal right on top of their face pieces, and it doesn't matter if you're using the Scout MSA drag or whatever, it all fits, and it does. It gives that obscured vision, and we can watch them what they're doing, so we're not tripping and falling all over the place. Absolutely.
So I just had to throw that in there. Just one of those little
absolutely
out there, trick of the trade.
No, I think that's great, and we're at the witching hour. We had a great panel today. I think Brian went to go conduct the drill because he left us already. But I'd like to thank Chief from Minnesota, Dave from Montgomery County, Maryland, and Brian for coming on. And ironically, a little shout out to Becky White, because this concept was she wanted to have this show and be on it, and then she decided to go on vacation. So we didn't want to participate anymore and drafted everybody. But I think our viewers got a lot out of this. And if Fire Engineering could take us off, thank you to Bobby Halton, Fire Engineering. Hopefully see everybody at FDIC Monday night if you're around. Politics and Tactics with Dave Polikoff, Nick Papa, and PJ Norwood. We're going to be making pizzas in the pizza oven instead of a dollhouse. We'll be showing you how convection and fire behavior works at my compound. So I'm looking forward to that. And check out this month's Fire Engineering for a Command article by myself and Dave Polikoff, Command Inside and Out, which is getting a lot of good feedback. And thank you for coming on the show today. And as always, I apologize that I had to go out doing union business. That's what we do here. But thanks to PJ Norwood for carrying this through. Have a great day.